encaustic. This is new work by her. A few more works on paper this time than in the past, but the works on paper are in the same vein as the works in encaustic. I'll turn the floor over to Cynthia.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me at the gallery. I love being here, and thank you for coming, each and every one of you. I appreciate that. Spent your Saturday afternoon coming. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, about my background first, and then I'll talk about some of my influences and also the materials that go into making these pieces. So I grew up here in Portland, and I went to Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, and I always thought that I would do something practical with my life. So I was a pre-med major in college and thought that was going to go really well until I was, you know, things weren't working out. I didn't feel good. I was unhappy, and I had an art history advisor say, "Why don't you try some art history classes?" So I thought, okay, I'll try that. So I ended up majoring in art history and taking some studio art classes, and then went, a few years later, I was supposed to go to Christie's in Scotland. I was going to do the whole art history, you know, the whole like decorative arts master's degree, and it's going to be practical. Like that was my whole world, practical. So that didn't work out. I ended up going to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. I was accepted, but didn't go to Christie's in Scotland. So then after Pratt Institute, I studied there for 2 years and took any and every class that I wanted to. It was a gift to myself. And I studied, oddly enough, photography, still trying to be practical, and illustration. I ended up, after my 2 years, deciding not to go to get my master's degree, but to go to Prague to teach English. So I lived in Prague for a year and a half. I illustrated. I worked on who I was, who I wanted to be, and came back to Portland. And I ended up living with my parents again for a year. My parents lived on an acre where we had a whole lot of foliage. English ivy everywhere. We were surrounded by foliage. And that's really where a lot of this shape comes from. It comes from doodling. It comes from just this memory of having this right up in my face all the time. We had this small forest in our yard, so I was always surrounded by nature. And that was in Southwest Portland. So in their house, when I came back from Prague, what was I going to do? I started doodling, or started sketching in my sketchbook, and it was more about play at that time. I had been so serious for so long and tried to make serious work for me, and it just didn't. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to, you know, I started playing in my sketchbook, drawing, started with charcoal. My work was at the Art Museum Rental Sales Gallery, and that was exciting. And then my work, which had this similar shape, I also was at the Margarita Feldman Gallery. And then she closed, and in 2005, 2006, I came to Augen Gallery. Bob came over and looked at some of my work. So my style has this biological foliage-like form to it all the way throughout, and it comes from, again, the foliage, and also some of the shapes that I use in my other pieces, which are wash pieces, come from Hungarian stitch work. So there's Matio stitch work, there's Kolacha stitch work, and I had a residency in Hungary in 2003, and that was really exciting for me to see that kind of artwork or that kind of stitch work, even in a doily market that I saw. I'd never seen that before in Budapest. So that was very influential for me, using those folk art kind of forms, those round forms. So the work that I do now in terms of what I'm trying to convey is joy and inspiration. The work that I do really is about conveying an emotion to the viewer. And I want you to experience what I experience when I create the pieces, which is absolute ecstasy. I love painting, I love drawing, and I love color. And color for me is about bringing in a palette that I don't see here in the Northwest. I grew up here, it's gray, it's dark. So seeing color and bright color is like color therapy for me. And it brings energy to my eyes. So that is why I love using bright color. I love color the way that it, I love color schemes or colors the way that they can energize each other when they're next to each other, like complementary colors. I love the way that can happen. So it's from also teaching color theory for so long that I started to really know how color can work together to create that sense of energy. And the work that I have here, like Bob talked about, I want to talk about 3 different kinds of material groupings that I've put together in my pieces. And this one here, I'll start off with this one, has layers. And the layers start off with Indie ink pen, then acrylic paint, and then beeswax on top. And you can actually touch it if you'd like to, just don't scratch it. I use my hand to shine it, so that's not a problem if you touch it. I draw into the piece when the wax is still, I guess you could say, curing, or when it's still warm. And so I'll draw into it with a stylus, and then I'll paint into these lines. Here I could use burnt umber, but in this case I used roofing tar with linseed oil, and then white oil paint on top. And what I like about that is the wax creates a kind of veil or a top layer that you can see through. I could use pigment, and I've taken on encaustic painting classes, but what I really like is the fact that you can see through it and see behind it. So there's kind of actual layers that you can look through. So this piece, the piece on the far back wall, has that same technique. So under my name has the Indie ink pen, the paint, and then the beeswax on top. And the beeswax has the more resin in it so that when it gets hot out or warmer, it won't melt right off the piece. That's kind of can be a factor. Live in Arizona, I suppose. So. The pieces here that I've created were, most of these were created at the coast, and I was experimenting with some alcohol ink paints, meaning isopropyl alcohol, and I created my own inks where I poured in some isopropyl alcohol into a solo cup with my golden acrylic paint and and mix it up and use an eyedropper to create these. And at the top of this cup, it's thinner, so you have lighter. At the bottom, it gets kind of gloppy. So a technical term, messed around with it with a paintbrush. And then I have gel pens and also glitter. So there's like this very crafty kind of aspect to it that I wanted to test out on paper. There's a plastic paper you can use called Yupo paper, but I really like the way it looks, this alcohol ink on paper itself. I like the way that you can play around with it and get different lightness and darkness and shape. So, what's that? Flat, yes, yes. But if it's on top, if it's kind of pooling up on top, I'll tilt the paper and it can run. Cool. Yeah. These 2 pieces over here are also alcohol ink. Same technique with the alcohol ink. Isopropyl alcohol is 91% that I mix it with and mix the pigment with. And then once it dries, I can play around with the forms, add my own shapes into it. And then the glitter, which is new and exciting for me because I love the way that I just like the way that it has that kind of iridescent quality to it. And then wax. There's wax on this piece and there's wax on this piece here. I accidentally spilled some wax on both of these pieces of Reeves BFK paper. So I thought, well, I guess it wants to have wax. So I painted wax onto them and then put the oil paint on top. The glitter was is underneath the wax.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what kind of wax, or does it matter what kind of wax you're using?
Hi Brian, I use refined wax.
Uh-huh.
So it's from R&F Encaustics.
Okay.
And then also from Golden. Golden has another. They're
Okay.
wax pastilles, really small. And you
Okay.
just melt them and then
I was wondering if it was like something different than like candle wax or something like that.
Oh, right.
Something specific for this
Right.
type of work.
It's not paraffin wax,
Uh-huh.
right? And that's this is just refined beeswax.
Okay.
So it's light and it doesn't have a lot of yellow to it. Although when you heat it up, it starts getting yellow.
Okay.
So this one doesn't have glitter on it, but I did add the oil paint on top after the beeswax that I painted onto it. And then finally, I'll talk about these pieces over here, the wash pieces. Oops, sorry. And these wash pieces, wash is in Italian.
I'm gonna squeeze through here.
Yes. In Italian, gouache means mud, and it's a traditional illustration medium. So it's a watercolor, it has chalk added to it, and I used it in my color theory class, and what I love about it is the fact that it's matte, it's really rich in color, and I can get really small, tiny details in there. And these were painted at the coast, and a lot of these are about the feeling of ecstasy, of joy, and the forms that I see in the ocean. And also doodling myself. So I have 3 more pieces back here. You can see that they're similar in vein, and also created the middle one with the encaustic paint, and on the sides the wash paint. So I would like to know if anybody has any questions about anything here. Yes.
The alcohol paint,
Mm-hmm.
it must evaporate very quickly.
Yes. You can get kind of high from it.
Use the dropper to kind of keep it contained as much as possible?
I use the dropper to paint with it essentially. Yeah. And if I pour, like over here on the far left, I can pour on, you know, a good amount of it and move it around. Before it, right, before it dries. Yeah. Ventilation is good. Yeah. Over there, the little dots that you see, and the dots that you see over here are eyedropper, from the eyedropper.
Are there any things you were surprised that worked out really well, or that didn't?
I was surprised the alcohol ink pieces worked out well, especially with it was an experiment. And you know, you get bored as an artist. You want to try something new, or you want to try different materials. So I thought, well, let's see what happens. I saw an artist working with it, and we talked about it a little bit.
Cool.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration to use the ripping tar as a pigment?
Right. I took a workshop,
Uh-huh.
and it all goes back to PSU. The woman at PSU who taught artists who went there, and I took the workshop from a woman who went there. And she's now in California, but I learned this mixed media technique, and she showed us all about how to use the wax, how to use a heat gun. You can also use a blowtorch.
Yeah, I really like the mixed media.
What's that?
I really like the mixed media.
Thank you, thank you.
The multiple layers.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that. Yes.
Can you talk about your experience with glitter? Decision. And do you find that it becomes a challenge to not use it?
Okay, I'm just do I find glitter to be irresistible? Is that how did
I may be projecting.
How did all this start out?
Really, why? But like, I just want to hear about your decision.
Okay.
Like, how did that come about?
I have a whole bunch of glitter. I made a painting out of glitter of TJ Norris, and he was an artist. He doesn't live here now, but I made a painting out of him entirely in glitter, and I had all this extra glitter, and I thought, well, I'll try. What? I have this glitter glue. Sounds so crafty, but I'll try it out, see what happens, and it's very popular. I've noticed, and I like it because it's so, I like using it sparingly. You can go overboard with it, which is exciting, and be a little sparing with it. I don't know, I think glitter's good in any kind of form. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate the dimension of that.
I do too. It's also interesting how the glitter under the wax still has that, that shine, if you will. Any other questions? No? Okay. All right, so thank you for coming. Mark is going to speak next about his work. Yes? So.